Okay, cool. So hey, with Susan. So this is gonna be weird because I talk to you every day. So I'm just talking to you again, but in
And
a
I'm
different
weirdly
format.
nervous, even though I talk to you every day. Is that possible?
I know, and it's like, why is this weird? I don't know. It's like there's an intent. We're like recording this one, even though we record all of our daily conversations. But the point is, one, you're the guinea pig for us kicking off this kind of podcast series out of Conduit. The start of this all started like 2 years ago on this journey of like building Conduit, and we can get into all that stuff later. But specifically, you've been there basically from the beginning and have gone through the craziness that is. But as part of that, we've assembled about 200 people around the world who are all hardware operators and founders and executors and all the things from finance to factories to chip suppliers. And we've created this network. And what's happened over what I've realized is I've got to speak to everybody, and I get to hear like the crazy stories behind the things that we've built, the things that people don't really know about, what goes on in the factory, on the floor, and supply chain, and all those things. And so we're starting this podcast series. Don't know if anyone's going to listen to it, but the specific thing is to record some of these amazing stories and to understand the career journey of the people who've built the things behind all the things we use every day. You've been a part of a lot of those things that we use every day, that millions of people use. And so I thought we'd start today with you as our first guest, because I work with you every day, and talk a little bit about you, where you're born, what hospital, all the details, the journey you've taken to where you are now, and then what's getting you excited about the future. So I'll let you kick it off with
Oh my
like
God. So,
Susan Paley. Tell us, tell us what little Susan was like.
so little Susan is a Midwestern girl at heart, born in Chicago. And I think when you're from the Midwest, and other Midwesterners will say to you, like, you just kind of take it with you no matter where you end up. It's just like you are extremely direct, no BS, which is what we like. Um, I grew up in a very conservative area, a high school pretty famous called New Trier High School, which for those of you who remember John Hughes movies, if you're old enough, that's like the Breakfast Club, 16 Candles. That was my high school. Um, and I think I always was like looking for like something was missing. Like it was sort of perfect, but it was very homogenous, and I wanted something unique and different. So I told my parents, I kind of became a rebel where my brother and I had very different approaches to discipline. My mother would tell me something like, again, to date myself, this is the Madonna era when everyone wore like lingerie as outerwear.
You're wearing the lace gloves.
I did have some lace gloves and I did wear like slips and lots of bangles and stuff. And so my mother would say to me, please do not go downtown and do not wear my slips as outerwear. And I'd say, okay, knowing that I was going to get in the car in 30 minutes. And that's where we were going with all my friends. My brother, who was younger, if they said to him, don't go do this thing, he would argue and fight. And then at the end of the day, he'd listen to them and not do it. And I'd just say, okay. And then I'd go do it anyway. So I think very early on, I learned about asking forgiveness, not permission. And it's really served me well through the majority of my career. So it has a very long history of where it started from. Um, Ended up at Wesleyan for undergrad, and it was like, my parents thought it was a weird radical campus, and I was like, oh, I'm home. Like it's the exploration of everything and anything, and question everything and explore. And so I loved it. I left Wesleyan. I ended up moving to Boston with like absolutely a liberal arts degree with no clue what I wanted to do with my life at all. I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, which my parents were very unhappy about. They thought really not going to be a good career path.
Still time. There's still time. Yeah.
Yeah, there's still time. Exactly. I'm still going to do one. And I just ended up working with a lot of documentary films, and then met David Mamet, who's a pretty famous playwright, started working for him and started doing feature films, and just kind of like your life takes these weird circuitous routes that you don't really know where you're heading, but you're heading there. And I
Right.
should say also, I was an American Studies major at Wesleyan, which is why this will all sort of, there is a through
Okay.
line through my story. Um, and as I started doing film, I ended up moving to LA. And as soon as I moved to LA, I was like, I worked so hard. I actually ended up going to graduate school when I was in Boston at BU for American Studies. I left because I thought I've never met more miserable academics in my life. That people who are screaming about the hegemony and I was like, I can't go spend 6 years doing a PhD and go live somewhere in like a remote area of Iowa and be unhappy. So I end up in LA,
The
and
furthest place possible from where you're at.
yes. And then
Yeah.
I literally said, okay, I'm really sick of film. I don't want to be on a, like, I didn't go to grad school to sit on a, a cube truck at 5 a.m. with a bunch of Teamsters who told me that they really write poetry. I was like, you know what, this isn't working for me. And a friend of mine who I done a short film with named Chris Payne, who actually was a runner for the Academy Award for Who Killed the Electric Vehicle. He was starting an internet company. So I said, not to date myself, I've heard of the internet. And I met him on the Santa Monica Ferris wheel. We took at the pier, we took the ride up, and I said, okay, I'm going to come work for you. So I show up, I'm basically offered a teacher's salary, and I have to figure out what the internet is. 1997. So I knew nothing. And when I say nothing, people would call and they wanted a website, which at those days was web wallpaper. And if you were an internet company in LA, you were basically working with the film studios and brochureware. So I literally would get a call. They're like, oh, Susan, there's someone wants to talk about building a website. Can you get on the phone? I thought, I don't think I can even BS my way through this. I know nothing. And then slowly I started learning. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I really get this. And then I'm like, we're going to put databases on everything. I did deals with Hyundai and with, we put Hyundai online. We put Mattel online. Like it was all this stuff. I had to, this is nuts. I had to go with the entire like Hyundai team presentation to explain how we were going to put them online and build a database for all their dealerships. And I had to explain cookies, and I bought chocolate chip cookies and I handed them out to everyone and explained what cookies were. So anyway, that was a kind of a crazy time. And then from there, I went and did a bunch of work with a company called Siegel and Gale to really learn branding. And then it became, and now we're at circa 2000. Now we're doing the first wave of incubators, which were not accelerators. That's the second wave. And in LA, it was hilarious. It was a big, we are famous for the gold rush here in California. And we had another gold rush there where it was like, oh my God, this is the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get rich. And so you had people who were pitching us. We were a company called Shelter Ventures, and it was guys from Akamai and pretty really wealthy guys who were like, let's go cash in on this. Let's go take you, Susan, and a bunch of other people. You'll be like a drop-in management team. So easy bake oven, right? A company comes in, idea, drop in the management team, and out comes the company. Well, obviously it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, well, no, I hope so.
I would wish, right? And so then they decided, wow, this is really hard, and we're too old and too rich for this. Let's do Series B. And from there, I left in one of the companies that was pitching, and this has kind of been the throughput of my career. If someone's pitching us hardware for the automotive space, and I said, you can't say you're a hardware company. You have to say you're a software platform that resides in hardware. And they're like, can you come help us? And this was a company, not to again date myself, called Fat Noise. And they were a bunch of guys out of UCLA's electrical engineering lab, brilliant. And they figured out how to reverse engineer all the automotive protocols. Yeah. And this way, and this was pre-iPod, so 2,000, 5,000 MP3s, they want to listen to them in their car, and they had no way to do that. And so they created a system that would replace the CD changer, allow you to put a ruggedized hard drive in. They remapped all the automotive protocols so you could use an OEM off-the-shelf head unit and use a text-to-speech interface that they had designed. So they were totally brilliant. It was amazing for me. My double major, liberal arts, with like some of the smartest electrical engineering guys. And this was kind of been the theme. It's like, I might not know something, but it doesn't, and this is for anyone. But if it's exciting and you're passionate about it, you just jump in and figure it out, because the dirty secret is nobody really knows what they're doing.
No, fake it till you make it.
Until you make it. And even if you quote make it, you're still making it up every day. Yeah. So don't think that like no one has the answers. They're just like, they have enough pattern recognition and knowledge to steer a ship in a direction. So anyway, these guys were absolutely brilliant. It was like, I was the den mother of this whole crew of youngsters. And we ended up getting acquired by Harman because we understood how to do software. I did the first digital content deals in the car. Which was really fun because I was with Capcom and Universal and who else? Audible, and it was all like, hey, we built our system, which was audio, also became video. So for like General Motors, we put an audio system, a multimedia audio system in the front seat, and then we could do video in the back. So we had a content. So I did all the content deals, and they're like, "Wait, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "I want your content. I want to create a code. I want you to unlock the code." And then when they put in their credit card, and then they can, experience it. And so all the lawyers were all on the phone. We're like, "Wait, you want to do what? We don't even know how to paper that." And that's the best time, because that's when everyone admits that you're all in it together to figure it out, and no one pretends to have an answer. And that's like, I think, when the most creativity shows up.
Was this around like the iTunes DRM stuff or before that?
It was before, because the iPod hadn't shown up yet. And so we
Okay.
were actually, before we got acquired by Harman, we were going to get funded by Jeffrey Moore, who's his VC firm. He wrote Crossing the Chasm. And we were pitching, and someone said, they were like, "This is such innovative technology. You guys are incredible." And these guys were really geniuses. And then someone says, "I'm kind of worried about that iPod thing." And we're like, "Why? Don't worry about it," right? Like, that guy was prescient, like he knew. So we get acquired by Harman because they realized that all of a sudden software is going to become a thing in the car, and they don't know anything about software. And from there, I end up running like really all the strategic business development for the consumer group. And this is when I think I really discovered like what corporates do and how corporates move and what happens when corporates are aligned and not aligned. And so Harman was going through this phase where they kind of lost their way. And because they lost their way, they thought process could help them find the way. So this is when they implemented Six Sigma.
Oh yeah, the Toyota Business System and Six Sigma. Yeah,
and they were like, but if you do that, you guarantee nothing ever gets out of the gates, right? Like you've stopped product development because you don't know what to build anymore. And so you've put a lot of process in to mask a deeper problem. So I realized that, when Gina Harman, who was a mentor to me, said, "JBL has lost the ability to connect with youth. I'd love for you to help figure out like how to address that problem." And so I thought about it, and I was like, wow, we are up the street from Roxy and Quicksilver. They own the youth market. What if we were to leverage what we're great at, which is audio manufacturing product, with what they're amazing at? They speak the same language. They have marketing, communication. They have an authentic brand. And they have distribution we don't have. They have Zoomies, they have PacSun, but we have the big box retailers have a lot, which don't exist anymore. We have Circuit City, we have Best Buy, we have Fry's, etc. And so we did a joint venture, but in the context of that, I had to go completely rogue. I picked the people who really wanted to do things, but felt like shackled by the Six Sigma 12 phase gate system. And we just worked outside the framework, and we were able to get something done and build a suite of co-branded products and launch them. And it was a huge deal. But I had to work outside the system and ruffle a lot of feathers and get people pissed. And, some people were happy, some people were mad at me. And I realized like, this is how you need to work. Like if you need to go around, I think I would just want, if you go through it, go around it. Because if you need to get something done, you just have to figure out the best way to get it done. So from there, I became known as the person in Harman who did the unconventional things, who lived by her own orthodoxy. So when Jimmy and Dre were starting Beats, and Beats was initially going to be a licensing entity, and they were going to do deals with a lot of the consumer electronics companies, one of their advisors called Harman, and the guy who spoke to him, which was an amazing guy named Michael McDonald, who ran the pro group, said, "You should talk to Susan Paley because she does really weird stuff around here, and this sounds weird." And so I talked to the guy on the phone. I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, "Let's just go meet at CES." So I ended up having that CES meeting in January 2009. And after 45 minutes of listening to amazing stories about Record Plant and, doing Patti Smith records, I'm like, why are we here? He said, "Oh, we want to create a signature sound. And we want to partner with all these consumer electronics companies." And I thought, great. We're starting like digital signal processing was just coming online for the car. So I thought we should be their automotive partner. So I pitched that to them, which they loved because, that's how Dre, when he would mix anything, he would listen to it in the car after he mixed it, because that's how he used to listen to music, like growing up in his car. And so they came to meet with us, and as we're trying to negotiate what this deal can look like as our automotive partner, someone, a guy named Steve Berman, who's one of the funniest guys in the record business, said, "Hey, you should come run this thing because we all have day jobs and we don't know anything about consumer electronics." And I thought he was joking. I'm like, "What? Like, are you kidding me?" And so I remember doing a budget. I'm like, "Do you have enough money to fund this? And this is going to take this amount." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." Little did I know, I thought I was going on a bullet train, but I went on a rocket ship. And so that was one of the craziest, most amazing, exhausting rides ever. And it was like going to business school. I got like a double MBA working for those guys because the amount of, you know, everything is right now. When someone calls you on a Saturday at 2 o'clock and says, "What's our burn rate? What's in our bank account?" You don't say, "Oh, I'll get back to you on Monday when we'll talk to bankers." Like, it's right now. Everything is right now. And the level of execution and expectation was, and the speed was unbelievable. And it really showed people what they were made of. And people who I brought in early did amazing things. Like, and it was, so it was crazy. It was absolutely out of control crazy.
What was driving the speed? Was it just trying to capture that market, that initial brand moment, or like was it a set of variables, or like, because there was a weird gap in the market at the time for a Halo brand. Everyone was trying to putting out accessories and
Well, and they also, there was no, when they started, like over ear and on ear headphones were like studio. It was all in ear headphones.
yeah,
I think the speed was probably driven by the fact that sometimes when you come from outside the business, like as Jimmy did, he didn't know the like margin requirements, like the process. And he was like, just get it done. And he's used to mixing records, which you can keep iterating and move really fast. So he's like, when you're on momentum, so he does everything with like feel and momentum. And so he applied that to Beats, which is like, no one really did that to a CE company. So it was really kind of crazy. And he challenged every assumption, and people fought it at first. And then they were like, "Oh, we should just get on this train because this guy knows something that we don't." And so I think he just didn't know like how to do structure and process and didn't believe in it. So it worked. I mean, it works to a certain point. I mean,
yeah.
I went from screaming about structure and process at 12, 16,
We have none.
to like, "Oh my God, when I got to the first day, it was just me. And I'm like, oh, we got to go build a freestanding company and have some process and structure because you got to sell it. You can't sell Jimmy. Like, you got to figure out like how." So I went from screaming about process to screaming about process in a 180. Like, we got to have some structure and process here.
Yeah, can't have none. Can't have a lot.
Yes. Yes.
Can you like talk a little bit? I don't think we've ever actually talked about this part, but like the product ramp, like how did you, like, that go from we have a sketch from an ID sketch, brand rendering, to like we want 1 million units, 10 million? Like, what was that ramp look like? Because as you're building process, like, how did you go from idea to product?
So it was a little like when I came in, they had already done a deal with Monster. So the way it was working when I walked in the door, it was Monster was handling with secret factories because they wouldn't tell anyone where they were building this thing. They were building the ramp and the production. The ID was starting to come from Robert Bruner from Ammunition.
Yeah.
And so initially, the anchor and the production was really based on, very early on, the Best Buy forecast. Best Buy was what built the Beats brand. And it was also because, and this was where the Monster deal really was advantageous to Beats, because Best Buy Monster had the best relationship with Best Buy of all the CE companies.
Yeah.
They did a lot of work with them. They really supported, they knew how to sell accessories. They would actually train blue shirts to sell accessories. And they probably overinvested in the Beats brand in the sense that like the usual margin requirements for you to scale, they kind of
Ate it.
they gave in, right, to what we wanted. So that worked out really well. And then when I came in, the transition started of, we started taking more ownership and control of engineering, because what Monster had and the process and structure they had was not built to scale to the level that Beats was going. And so even though Robert Bruner continued to play a very integral part on the ID side, you needed him on the ID. You needed a really strong mechanical team, which initially was Alloy, before we built all of our own people in-house. And then you needed to have much more ownership with the factory so that you could start to scale. And the weird thing was so you've got the scaler of like just the actual product, but what happened early on is that people started customizing their beats. And so they would go to this company called Colorware in Minneapolis, and colorware, which we found out like after maybe they were doing this for a year, colorware would basically put all the electronics through a huge oven, right? And like do the oven transfer. They fried everything, right? And so we were like, first of all, and they would charge a fortune. They would probably charge $600 or $700 to get a pair of Beats customs or colorware. And we're like, why are we giving up all that money and letting them do a process that's frying the electronics? So we had to scale at the same time we had to create a custom line so you could do units of like 500,
Yeah.
2,000, 1,000. And that was really successful because people, you want to do a special team or, like we did so much work with athletes. So you're kind of scaling, and those Halo 1,000, 5,000, whatever would drive the core sales. Just like I learned about pop color, right? When we had the Beats Red, red was done to drive black and white sales. Red wouldn't have the same volume, but you need
Interesting.
that pop color to go drive the core colors.
Interesting. Cool.
So lots
Okay.
of
So,
lessons.
I know. So we can do a whole like 3 hours on that.
Oh yeah, and then
Yeah.
the crazy behind the scenes. Yes, that's something for cocktails.
Okay, so walk us through like from Beats to now, and like you've gone on another phase. So kind of phase three, four, three, phase three.
Well, I am Web 1, 2, 3, so we'll call this maybe.
Well, I'll call phase three.
It's also kind of a magic number. As I tell everyone, whenever you're doing a presentation, do it in threes because like threes are what people handle. Like if you give them a choice, don't give them more than three options,
Exactly.
right? It's sort of like that's what people's brains are really wired for. So we'll call this 3 phases.
Yeah.
So I leave Beats. I did all, and also the other thing I did at Beats, which was also kind of shaped my career, is I knew that we needed to build a licensing strategy. Um, we had a deal with Monster where, and again, when the HTC deal came in, we broke away from Monster, but initially they controlled like they had a large margin requirements for headphones and speakers. So I knew if we built software, which we called Beats Audio, we would control that and have 100% margin, and allowed us to do a deal. And Beats Audio, I'd love to say it was like this unique algorithmic thing. It was a fancy DSP, but it allowed us to do a deal with HTC and put HTC in phones. It allowed us to put Beats Audio in laptops, Beats Audio in Chrysler cars. So what happened was maybe that only brought in like 40, 50, $60 million in revenue, but the marketing budgets that you got to be a part of now, you're like quadrupling your marketing budget because you're getting a piece of all of those massive marketing budgets across automotive, across, PCs and phones. So it was, and that to me is that intersection of software and hardware.
Yeah, you like quadrupled or 10x your distribution because not only was it a value prop to you, it was a complete value prop to everyone you're integrating it to. It was their
Everybody
differentiator.
wins. Like, right, we get what we need, they get what they need, they get the shine from the brand. We get to hijack marketing budgets, as we say, and the OPM, other people's money, because, and then even though we got marketing budget, then they were like, your marketing is so good because Jimmy was just brilliant and Omar and people coming in. They're like, why don't you do the creative? And then you get to like really control the narrative. Anyway, so I adopted my son, and I was from Ethiopia, and I remember bringing him back, and I was never home. So I was working crazy hours. I had a commute to the office. I would see him for 20 minutes in the morning, and then when I came home at night, he was already asleep. So that went on for like 8 months probably. And I remember this one weekend where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this perfect Saturday. This is my guilt Saturday, right? We're going to the park and we're going to get ice cream. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I'm going to squeeze in like a whole week into this perfect day. And we start the day and he is so cranky and he's crying. And I'm so pissed at him. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is supposed to be the perfect day. Like, I'm
my schedule now.
yeah, like I'm supposed to make up for everything that I'm not seeing. And I was like, okay, and then it kind of hit me. I'm like, this is so unfair and this is untenable. And what if we don't have that bond? And what if he has a reactive attachment disorder because I was building headphones in China? And so that was my like, and the Sheryl Sandberg lean in, lean back. That was my lean back moment of like, I have to spend some time. I've been at Beats for 4.5 years, which felt like 10 because we were working 7 days a week. And I'm like, okay, this is the time to sort of step off the gas. Yeah. And I ended up, and I was just talking to these guys this morning, actually, some guys from HTC called me like, hey, we're doing some work for General Motors. You want to do some consulting with us? I'm like, getting the band back together, which is really what every person who's been in the business long enough wants. We want the people that you love in your journey, you're like, how are we going to get the band back together? Because you'll have that one magic group that like defined all other groups are defined by that one magic like work situation you had. And so when they call me to get the band, I'm like, great. And so
Yeah.
I got to spend a year doing some consulting for GM, spending a lot of time with my son and being super flexible. And so that's when and also during that time, my dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I really started thinking about like health, human performance, the brain, like how do we, there's nothing worse than like being able to build things and then seeing like a parent go through something that you're like, I can't help in any way. And no one
Yep.
seems to have an answer and no one seems to have a solution. And so I got very interested in that and started doing some work with Bill Gross at Idea Lab, looking at like early wearables. This was like 2012, 2013, before the watch came out. And literally we were going to go get something funded. Then everyone's like, no one's going to give you any money because the Apple Watch is launching in 2 weeks.
Trust me, this is a story I know very well. Yeah. We were doing similar things, but in different worlds at that time.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. And in that journey too, I spent a ton of time with like other early founders and helping people, like from stuff I had learned. And then I actually did my own startup, which was that's where I got to learn a lot of the lessons. Like, right, Beats was a lesson in like how everything can go right all the time. My next startup was a lesson on like kind of some of the hubris probably from Beats, how like it was such an anomaly on a scalar. And we're sitting with COVID, and I knew it was a research project, and it was a lot of really hard lessons that were really important. I had to go build a supply chain. I was merging two different disciplines together, and it was really focused on, although it was like it was a haptic platform and it was focused on kind of music entertainment. I really wanted it to be focused on health and looking at binaural stimulation, mechanoreceptors. Receptors. Like it was a wild project, but it was the wrong time. And I still, to this day, don't understand why haptics are kind of magic and they still can't find their way in the consumer space. And I think one of the other problems was I knew that gaming was going to be the unlock for this. And I had all the relationships in the world in audio. And I was in because I didn't have the gaming relationships, I got into a chicken or egg thing where I said, if you adopt this technology, and this is what all of the haptic companies had the same problem with gaming, is they know gaming's an unlock, but the gaming companies are like, you know, I can sell GTA 6 or 7 is coming out, whatever. And they're like, we're gonna do $1 billion in a couple hours. Why do I need an accessory? Why
Yeah.
do I need to like burden a dev cycle with an accessory? I already make so much money now. You're not giving me any reason to be there. And I said, but if you have the accessory, it could be magic, and we could be built into the game, and we can take audio, and you can create a whole haptic library. And they're like, why? You don't need to. You aren't giving us a compelling
As a
reason to
person
do
who
it.
worked on Xbox accessories and things like that, I totally like. You don't understand we're builders, and we like the creative side of things.
Yes.
But when you start thinking about the business economics on a P&L spreadsheet, they're like, why am I adding 5 LEDs to this? That's like $50 million to the bottom line. Like, you don't need the LED. Like, I remember going through that the first time in my career, and I was like, oh, yes, okay. It's not like you're not going to bump sales by 20%. And it's just these things don't come to fruition.
Yeah.
But
Now,
yet they're cool delighters and amazing technologies. It's just finding the right overlap is really, really hard.
and I think also is this like inflection point, which has now happened, which you actually, the way you build companies is so different now, right? Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't, in Beats, we had to go bring in a lot of people. We had to do everything in house. And if we went to China, we had to go like drop a bunch of people in China. Well, that's COVID changed all that, right? And just the way, and also the tools have gotten like 1,000 times better. So now you can keep teams really small and nimble and iterate and design in a different way. You don't have to do your huge EBT, DVT, PVT builds until you really have a level of de-risk that you couldn't have had before. So it was a great learning experience. Also, I had to go raise venture. And so like learning that whole world in Beats, we never had to do venture, right? And so learning the good, the bad, and the ugly of venture, which is always a journey for anyone who has not done venture before. So, and it's funny because I think, and people say this, when you make mistakes and you have to like, your own preconceived notions of things or etc. And all that comes at you, how you are as a person, how you are, like what you're good at, what you're not good at, that becomes a superpower because you start to recognize it in others. And you're like, again, everything's about, I've made the mistakes. So now I have the pattern recognition to help other people not make the mistakes. So as I'm in my journey,
Well, I mean, just to like interrupt you there. I mean, that's when we met. So
Yes. And so,
worked out for me that like,
yeah, and it worked out for me too. Cause I was like, this is one of the, so I have this interview with Amish. I said, this is like one of the smartest product people I've met in a really long time.
well, hold on. Before you get into that, like, I get a random person who emails me that says like, there's a job opportunity. I was just coming out of like my first startup on the bench, didn't want to do anything. And they're like, Susan Paley would like to fly you to LA to have a meeting. And I'm like, of course you take this meeting, right? Because they're like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Like this Seattle boy is going down here. And I remember walking to the office and I was like, those engineers are just crushing it. But wow, what a complicated stack you were working on too at the time.
Okay. Yes. I like to do
Amazing progress. But I was like, oh, I don't really know how to move to LA. This is a crazy project, but coming out of my wearables background and embedded and everything else. But like Susan Paley wants to meet you, you get on a plane. So that's how this started. Yeah.
you're like, are you crazy? And I was like, yes. And I actually, the other thing was interesting is that this project was really hard. And I felt like every day I was pushing a rock uphill for it to be, what's the famous Greek myth, right? The rock is always at the bottom of the hill and he has to push it up to the top of the mountain every day. And that's part of, like, it also was because timing wasn't right, conditions weren't right. COVID blew everything up, even if it was going to be right. So there was no way. So it was, but again, you learn a ton from those. I ended up like taking the assets were given to a healthcare company that's like going to work with it. So I was able to step away. And then I started working with a ton of founders, and I'm an LP in a fund. I sit on several boards. I think, as a lot of people know, more women on boards, especially more operators and women on boards who can be there to really support the CEO because they've been on both sides of the table. And they know what it takes to build something, right? It's like so much work, and you need people in your corner to support you that understand, can also help you navigate where to spend your time and energy and what not to focus on. So I meet this guy Amish, who I like realized like, okay, we got to figure out a way to work together. And so we were, and then he says, I'm doing this thing called Conduit. And I said, okay, I'm going to fly. You flew to LA. I'm flying to Seattle. And I go to Seattle and I see all the builders who've been trying for so long to get things built, and there was no money, or retired and came out of Microsoft and were like just ready to help the next generation. We're all in a room. And they were all like fired up to be in that room. And I thought, this is the community. I mean, who doesn't want community? Who doesn't spend their entire life personally and professionally looking for community? And so he had assembled something that was pretty magical. And I'm like, I have to be a part of this. Like, I have to build one in LA. I have to bring all these people together, because most people who've built products before have been in trenches and they want to support others. Like, there is, as Amish always says, there's an empathy around like, oh my God, it's so hard. And
Well,
you know it's so hard because you've done it, right? And it's like that knowing wink and smile when you meet another builder. You're like, oh yeah, all that time in China on those floors, like almost crying because
well,
like so.
yeah, I mean, to add to that, like the impetus, we're not getting into the conduit stuff, but someone asked me this morning, like an LP investor call or whatever, and it was, hey, so why do you have these 200 people around the world and these fellows and these partners? And I was like, what do they get out of it? And I was like, oh, some just want to hang out, some want deal flow, some want to be advisors, some want to that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I go, but there's just a level of empathy that the software folks don't understand. There's like these scars and beatings of building physical stuff and like operating it, executing it. And once you get to like that second phase of your career, the pay it forward and the how do I help the next one just like is ubiquitous across every single person. Right. And the reason, and so people don't get that because they're like, well, what's in it for them? I'm like, there's just a level of empathy of like helping someone not go through it the same way they went through before.
I would even add to that. So if you think about, like, I always tell people, so when like a software SaaS company fails, no one cares. It's never like recognized, right? When Juicero fails, the whole internet makes memes of it, and everyone thinks it's the funniest thing. Or when Humane, right? And so in this like rising tide lifts all boats, if we can enable the next generation of builders to be successful, the unlocks are so massive because we want to invest in builders. We want them to be successful, right? Because we're deploying capital in startups. And so it's important that we have a set of successful startups and founders who are building things. And I think now finally, with robotics, AI, defense spending, like now after we were in the trough for so many years, and now
Mhm.
finally like there's a light, and people are like, oh, something that we as builders have known forever, you build systems, right? And systems are hardware and software. And the SaaS world business of like 10 years of like, you don't never need hardware. Of course you need hardware. Hardware is the big unlock, right? It
Yep.
allows the intelligence system to run on it. So now you're finally in a situation where like, I think everything is starting to line up in a way that it hasn't been lined up for a long time, or maybe not ever, because you didn't have this level of intelligence in the software before.
Agreed. Okay. So now we're working together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taking a different approach to kind of early stage physical tech, hard tech, deep tech, whatever you want to call these things, but building things in the real world at the intersection of physical and digital. And we're taking a kind of different approach, right? We're trying to look at it as how do we help technology all the way from IP and idea all the way through like Series A, B scale. As people who've built that, we've talked about the valleys of death and all the different things you have to go through and the phases of I have IP and deep tech, and then how do I translate it to a company that actually has a revenue model, let alone build that hardware and software system, then manufacture it, then scale it, then get it all invested in and operating it with the team. We're looking at that holistically, thinking about the different parts. And you're working on multiple parts of this. Do you want to kind of dive into like the thesis? Like, okay, Susan's gung ho about solving these problems and kind of how we're doing it or how we're approaching it at Conduit and what you've been doing over the last year or so operationalizing it.
Yeah, I mean, so I realized early on, I was like, I want to be a part of Conduit, right? I love this community. And so as we get involved with the studio, it becomes really clear what I'm really good at and what I'm not good at. So Amish is an idea guy and loves Visios and whiteboards and can like create anything. And I start to zone out. Like it's too much for me. And I don't have ideas. And then all it does is show me that I'm not an idea person, like over and over again. So what started happening was I was like, I love this, but I love when the ideas are like there's a rudimentary prototype. There's some sort of proof of concept, right? And they're really thinking about like, how am I going to get this to market, right? How am I going to build it? And then how am I going to commercialize it? And that's when I really start to get excited because I get to leverage the network that I built over, 25 years. And I said to Amish, this is awesome for stuff coming to the studio, but like, because there's no one else here who's really supporting hard tech, like let's support everyone that we can early stage and help de-risk them to get them to that next set of milestones. And so we started working with a lot of different companies, whether they were fed through just our network, through VCs, like, can you help these guys? And it's really, and as you start iterating this, it becomes more productized. And so really it falls along three vectors, whether we're helping you with product readiness, manufacturing readiness, or commercial readiness. And it's all about really like getting you to that next milestone, which will hopefully unlock more capital. Because all this, when you're talking about building and companies, it's about getting capital. It doesn't have to be just VC capital, but it's getting enough capital to get the next, getting enough signal that will then unlock the next tranche of capital, wherever that capital comes from. And so as we started working with all these other companies, we also started coming across research organizations that had a lot of IP. So I'll just call their IP the ideas that Amish comes up with that was in various stages, right? So it could be just like IP that was filed and maybe a rudimentary like benchtop prototype was created. And they had to figure out, because they were research entities, what to spend dollars on, right? What do they focus on? What do they not? And like any corporate, any research organization, what happens is people get very emotionally attached to ideas.
Yep.
And then they kind of die and resurrect them like ghosts, like over the years. And so we went into a large hospital research organization for a lot of their non-regulatory IP. And they said, please help us either kill this or move this forward. Like we are in a set of like, it's kind of in no man's land and it's taking up brain space without any outcome. And so we started working with them and got them through that first tranche. We think there's a there. Now we're entering into phase 2. We also started working with a large research organization funded mostly by military warfighter money. And they have a situation where they have all these projects that have gotten to TR level, technology readiness level, could be 5, 6, 7. And they have two problems. One, if the military branch that actually asked them to build the thing wants now, I want 100 of them or 5,000 of them, they're like, we can build one. We don't know how to. And so there's a lot of money being left on the table that way on that commercialization arm, just for the branch of the government that ordered it. Two, most of this technology has a lot of civilian use. for dual use that they don't even know how to explore. And because these are research organizations, they don't have the DNA around commercialization, but they know because of a lot of the volatility in the government right now, no one is assured of their budgets. Even military budgets are getting cut, or they're like shifting strategies where things that were always underwritten by, they could guarantee they were getting 500,000 each year. All of a sudden they said, nope, you're going to get 300 this year. And that's a huge blow to a research organization. So there is I think a movement in the market of like, we have to figure out how to like be in control of our own destiny and not rely on government grants as our only source of income year in and year out. So it's been, so it's really, everything is around commercialization. And whether it's ideas, early stage companies, IP from research organizations, it's like, how do we move it into commercialization and put more wins on the board for everybody?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like, I started Conduit. It was starting at the venture studio at the core. Really the premise was, how do we become an institutional co-founder or a co-founder for these entrepreneurs who have ideas but have never built for the real world before? So like, how do we become a hardware co-founder? And we developed that over the first, 6 to 8 months, built our playbook. Of course, Adeline, hopefully we'll get her on here one day, is just a powerhouse of process and how to systematize that and make it efficient. It's like, how do we more capital efficiently build startups? Don't take $5 million of their typical hardware startups and die, but apply great venture studio, venture building, market analysis before building anything. And I think what you've unlocked, and I think the markets came toward us, was also, founders are one customer of this co-creation platform, but oh my God, look at how much IP and really good research and development has been done in these labs, academic, military, and private, that have no pathway to hire us, for instance, like our crew, to go in there and be product people, for instance, and vice versa. We don't have access to those researchers in those laboratories. So this better together concept is like starting to forge, which is kind of amazing. And I think is going to be a main focus of ours. And then taking a fund and traditionally investing in those things as they mature. I have this hypothesis that, we can 3x the efficiency, right? Instead of
and not have overhead.
Like $2-3 million in a hardware pre-seed. Hey, for like $500 to $1 million, we could probably get to the same leveraged outcome to raise a round or a financial round. So that's kind of the hypothesis. Well, I think we'll run it over the next couple of years. But I think you've unlocked this other part that like naturally the winds kind of went in our direction. But also it's like important, like they need us and we need them. And there's a better together story here.
Yeah, we do a lot of work also, with Mass Challenge, and it's incredible seeing like what we were just like judging for the strength and resiliency cohort. And there's some incredible technology, but a lot of this technology might be built by 4 PhDs that are extraordinary. But they don't have the commercialization or the business people yet at this time. And so helping just them like with the pattern recognition of like, it's very hard to build a company for everyone. And there's a ton of mistakes, but there's some mistakes that you can avoid and that are like typical mistakes. And so what we want to do is help people navigate across the most common mistakes, especially but a lot of this also goes through like finance, right? Thinking about how much money you need and how to scale. How do you scale this company in a really responsible way so that you're not dependent on like, you're not going to run out of money before you get to that next milestone, right? Yeah. That's what and that's happened so many times to hardware companies. And so that's what we really want to help that not happen with as many companies as possible.
Well, let's do it. I got a whole line out the door. We got to go figure that one out. Yeah. Before we kind of finish this first experimental podcast conversation thing, 2 things I'll ask. One is, what I found very interesting when we have these kind of forums, usually we do these things in real life and we have kind of a bunch of fellows get on the stage. The people who reach out afterwards are always like 27 to 32 in their career, went through COVID, and are like, oh, I didn't know. I thought my path was the thing I learned, right? I'm an industrial designer. I'm a hardware engineer. But your path is so random, right? Like that's always the feedback. Like, yeah, I'm a computer scientist who like, and just all random, right?
American studies major.
Is there a piece of advice for kind of that phase 1 part of their career, folks to kind of just think about or be aware of, or like the inner voice, if you could pop a Susan voice in there, once in a while when they're thinking about stuff? Like, what would you drop in there?
You know, it's funny. It's really hard. Like when you're young, like everyone told you should do computer science. Now all the computer science people are not getting jobs, and they're like, "Wait, but I was told for 10 years I had to get a computer science degree." Now this whole AI thing, like, what's happening? Um, I think it's about just, creating, right? So like the tools don't really matter. It's like it's all about like what do you want to build? What do you want to create? And if you're a builder, you're a builder. And you need to also just find like don't let anyone tell you there's something you can't do. My father used to say like, "Oh, you shouldn't get in the film business. You don't have any connections. You'll never get in." And I'm like, "Watch me." Right? And so like do not be constrained by other people's notions of what you should or should not do. Do what you want to do, what you're passionate about, but you also need to do the work, right? And so like I have spent so much time. I'm a grinder, just in general. I'm a Gen X grinder. That's just what we are in Gen X. Um, so you have to do the work, but if you're willing to do the work, you can kind of like create your own reality. And don't be constrained by other people's perspectives of what they think you can and cannot do.
That's a good place to end this. That was great.
Okay.
I'm going to write that on a t-shirt and wear it.
The guinea pig.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll probably talk to you in a few hours on
Okay.
thanks for doing it. I'll talk to you.
Okay.